Hi everyone, welcome to my video about Twin Peaks, made for commentary and analysis. Have you ever watched David Lynch and Mark Frost's TV show Twin Peaks from the 1990s? What about the movie prequel Fire Walk With Me from 1992? The Twin Peaks return on Showtime from 2017? If you have answered no to all of these questions, don't even worry about it. I'll tell you everything you need to know about the main plot that started it all. Twin Peaks began with one central mystery. Who killed Laura Palmer? And while Laura is a large part of the Twin Peaks universe, this universe is vast. For this video, I'm only going to be focusing on who killed Laura Palmer. Specifically, who, where, when, why, how, and what? Which is going to be complicated enough. The mystery spans the original Twin Peaks series, Season 1, to almost halfway through Season 2, though at some points I will have to mention things from the Twin Peaks movie Fire Walk With Me, which is a prequel to the series but was released after the series had already come out. For those of you who watch Twin Peaks, feel free to stick around anyway. Spoiler alert, the main mystery of Twin Peaks will be spoiled beyond this point. I'll be discussing the main mystery. First spoiler is a whole lot of trigger warnings. Twin Peaks was prime-time TV, but the list of crimes is many, and it's impossible to extradite most of these possible triggers from the main narrative. I've heard that YouTube's algorithm might push this video down, which would be a shame because I'm just trying to warn people out there. But let me tell you what these triggers are in YouTube-friendly language here at the beginning, even though I'm not going to mince words later on. Trigger warning, Twin Peaks contains the R word, the one that's 4 letters and rhymes with drapes. R word of someone under 18, R wording a family member, and legally the first word would start with D and the second word starts with V. Usage and unmanageable dependence of not legal substances, unaliving oneself, and also the bird is unalived by someone. Other things in Twin Peaks that might be controversial, insulting, not woke, or PC by today's standards, depending on what you might think of how they portrayed. Portrayal of Native American people in imagery, disabled characters, S-work is real work, lack of diverse characters, derogatory language towards little persons and others. And I also forgot all the mental health depictions that might also be seen badly. Part 1. Who killed Laura Palmer? The short version. It was her dad, Leland Palmer. Unless you saw the TV movie Twin Peaks, that was the pilot plus an additional 20 minutes. If you saw that instead, then the killer was a guy named Bob. But don't worry, in Twin Peaks The Return, Special Agent Dale Cooper traveled back in time and saved her. They're all done. Thank you for coming to my video. Okay, it's a lot more complicated than that, but before we get into the heavy stuff, let me explain the pilot versus the TV movie. Part 2. The pilot alternate ending. How we got 2 solutions to the mystery, even though it's the same solution. When the pilot episode was filmed, an additional 20 minutes was filmed in case the pilot wasn't picked up. These additional 20 minutes would make the story into a complete film that could be released as a TV movie. In this TV movie, the killer is a man named Bob. Thing is, Bob is also the killer in the series. I know I said it was Laura's dad, but it was her dad possessed by the spirit of Bob. So in Twin Peaks, the movie, which was released in certain countries and which I saw and rented at the video store, the killer is a man named Bob. Bob's a regular dude, as far as we can tell. Probably has a birth certificate, social security number. But in the series, the killer is Laura's dad, Leland Palmer, possessed by the malevolent spirit named Bob. Sorry if you thought this was going to be easy. Part 3. A brief explanation with no context. The short version. Twin Peaks starts with Laura Palmer's dead body being found by Pete Martell. About this time, another girl, injured but she pulls through, Ronette Pulaski, wanders across state lines, thereby bringing the attention of the FBI. That comes in the form of Special Agent Dale Cooper. Cooper goes to Twin Peaks and meets up with Sheriff Harry Truman, Deputy Sheriff Hawk, and Deputy Sheriff Andy. to find out who killed Laura Palmer, who hurt Ronette, and this leads them to a series of clues that end up unraveling more seedy dealings in the town of Twin Peaks. By mid-season 2, it is discovered that Laura was murdered by her own father, Leland Palmer, and he also killed her cousin Maddie Ferguson, who looked exactly like her because it was the same actress except with darker hair. It is revealed that as a young boy, Leland met the entity or man called Bob. Bob would flick matches and say, "You want to play with fire, little boy?" The fire thing is relevant, so just keep it in mind for the future. Leland was possessed by Bob, who would do terrible things in Leland's body, like also kill a different girl, Teresa Banks. Leland never remembered any of these terrible things. It was Bob using Leland's body that abused and ultimately killed Laura. So that's basically what happened. Still curious? Then let me tell you about the journey. Part 4. The Tragic Life of Laura Palmer. Laura Palmer was a beautiful and popular girl that pretty much everyone seemed to like, or at least know. She had a nice best friend and a troublemaker pretty boy athlete of a boyfriend, but she also had a secret life. Laura smoked, drank, did drugs, did sex work, and was cheating on said boyfriend. Laura Palmer was being sexually abused by her father since she was about 12. As she grew older, Laura abused drugs which were provided to her by her boyfriend Bobby, and also by a truck driver named Leo Johnson, and a bartender casino card dealer named Jock Renault. She had a sexual relationship with Leo and Jock as well. There were people in Laura's life who all knew parts of the whole, parts of her secrets, but no one seemed to know everything in its entirety. Laura even kept 2 different diaries, 3 if you count the audio recordings to her therapist. Laura was seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Jacoby. She would record audio tapes to send him, telling him all sorts of details about her life. Laura also confided in a man named Harold Smith. He was a young, maybe early 30s man with agoraphobia. Laura told Harold that Bob wanted to, quote, be her or kill her, end quote. Harold had Laura Palmer's secret diary, which he never handed over to the police, but was later found by the police. For most years, Laura believed she was being abused by a man named Bob, who would come in through her window at night. She saw Bob, as in the actor Frank Silva, not as her father Leland Palmer. But one day, in Fire Walk with Me, she realized that Bob was her father when she was at home instead of at school, and she ran out of her house and hid from Bob. So one night, when Laura was 17, Laura and her friend Ronette went to a cabin with Leo and Jock to party, i.e. do drugs and have sex. Laura was tied up against her will. Leland showed up at the cabin and took down Jock. Leo saw Jock on the ground and made a run for it, so the girls were alone when Leland came inside. He took Laura and Ronette to a train car. Ronette was able to escape, but Laura was killed. Laura's afterlife is in the famous Twin Peaks room with the red curtains and chevron black and white floor, referred to as the Red Room. I want to take a minute to commend Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer, for her portrayal of such a complex character. When Laura dies at the end of Fire Walk with Me, it is tragic. We're watching the death of a character we already know, as opposed to when the TV series started with the dead body of a girl unknown to us. Fire Walk with Me is like torture porn. I know Cheryl Lee was in her 20s, but she was portraying a 17-year-old girl, half naked, topless, being abused by middle-aged men and her own father. It can be a really hard film to watch. Part 5. How Agent Cooper solved the murder of Laura Palmer, Maddie Ferguson, and Teresa Banks. The long version of this story, so just be ready for it. Agent Cooper solves Laura's murder with good old-fashioned police work. And magic. Magic is the word that Cooper himself uses at the end. Cooper is a spiritual man on some level. In one scene, he details the history of Tibet to the Twin Peaks law enforcement, and how, with a dream of Tibet, he subconsciously gained knowledge of, quote, deductive technique involving mind-body coordination operating hand-in-hand with the deepest level of intuition, end quote. So, Cooper solves the murder using good old police work, things that happened in his dreams, a vision he had when he got shot, visions that Laura Palmer's mother had, messages from a spirit inside a log, messages from outer space, and maybe some other stuff that you might interpret differently than I did. Confused? Well, like I said, this is the long version, so buckle in. In Fire Walk With Me, a girl in Deer Meadow, Washington, Teresa Banks, was found dead. Her body was discovered in a river. The FBI went to investigate and found a small piece of paper with the letter T under the fingernail. This is the biggest clue tying the two murders since, when Laura Palmer's body was found, it was with the letter R under her fingernail. Like Laura, Teresa was an underage sex worker. Unlike Laura, Teresa had no family or seemingly any friends either that missed her when she was gone. One of her clients was Leland Palmer. When she was alive, she tried to put together a threesome for him with two of her friends, who ended up being Laura and Ronette. When Leland saw them, he ran before Laura and Ronette could see him. Then eventually, Leland killed Teresa. Presumably, Bob killed her while possessing Leland's body. In Laura's diary, she mentions someone named Jay, and there's a key to a safety deposit box inside a baggie with cocaine residue. The safety deposit box is full of cash, and there's a magazine, a nudie magazine. It's called Flesh World, with a picture of Ronette in it. There was also a picture of Leo Johnson's truck, parked outside his house. The police also find a videotape where Laura and Donna are dancing in the woods. Thanks to some normal police work, Cooper notices that in the video, there is a reflection in Laura's eye of a motorcycle. This eventually leads them to James. He's a biker. James admits that it's him who shot the video, that he knew Laura did cocaine. He says that about 2 days before she died, something scared Laura, and suddenly she wouldn't talk to him anymore. I'll spare you the suspense. Laura realized her father was Bob. James also admitted that the night she died, after she went home from Bobby's, she snuck out with him, James, and then at one point jumped off his motorcycle and ran into the woods. This is in the middle of the night, by the way. He never saw her again. The police find the scene of the crime, the abandoned train car. Inside, Cooper and Truman find blood, but more noteworthy is the little pile of dirt. On top of it is a gold necklace with a half-heart pendant and a sheet of paper that says "Fire Walk With Me" written in blood. I'll spare you the suspense again. James has the other half of the heart necklace, and eventually they also find out that the blood is Leland's. In the series, the first time we see Agent Cooper use some unconventional means for investigation, he's throwing rocks at a glass bottle while Sheriff Truman reads off names of people and their connection to Laura. He got this idea from a dream. These are people whose names start with a letter J, as per Laura's diary entry, nervous about meeting Jay tonight. It is noted that the bottle fell over but didn't break when they read off Dr. Jacoby, and when he throws the rock in the name of Leo Johnson, the bottle shatters. At this point, it should be noted that Jacoby still had information he hadn't passed on to Cooper. And of course, Leo Johnson was there the night Laura murdered, so I'm going to be talking about him a lot. You should remember him. And the next step is Margaret Lanterman, aka the Log Lady. Such a nickname because she is always carrying a log in her arms like a baby. As we learn in her very first appearance, Margaret receives messages from the log. We first see her say to Agent Cooper that her log saw something the night that Laura died, and one day her log will have something to say about it. When Cooper asks, "What did the log see?" Margaret challenges him to ask the log himself. When he hesitates, she smugly says, "Thought so," and walks away. Sometime after Cooper does his thing with the bottles and the rock, perhaps that same night, Cooper dreams. He dreams a lot of things, and all of it comes out somehow in the real world eventually. A lot of this dream is actually made up from that footage that was filmed for the alternate ending to the pilot. We see Laura's mom running down the stairs from the morning after Laura died. A flash of Bob hiding in Laura's room, flashes of light with the sound of electricity flickering on and off. Then Mike, the one-armed man, reciting the first half of the Fire Walk With Me poem. Or just the Fire Walk With Me poem. Oh god, okay, fine, let me get into that right now. Basically, there's the Fire Walk With Me poem. It gets recited throughout the series by various people, but there is a second half, or maybe it's a different poem or something that comes out later. Anyway, the first part, or the entirety, however you want to look at it. Through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds. Fire, walk with me. So that's what Mike says. In the dream, Mike explains how we, that's what he said, we, lived among the people above a convenience store. He says, quote, "I too have been touched by the devilish one, tattoo on the left shoulder, but when I saw the face of God, I was changed, took the entire arm off, End quote. He says his name is Mike and says the other guy's name is Bob. And here we see a clip of Bob that's, again, a scene from the alternate ending pilot. Bob calls out Mike's name, and then he recites his own poem, or another part of the Fire Walk With Me poem. It sounds poetic. I'll catch you with my death bag. You may think I've gone insane, but I promise I will kill again. Anyway, take that as you will. 2 stanzas of one poem, 2 different poems. Either way. After all that, we're back in the Red Room. The dream had actually briefly started this way, but moved on to everything else I said. So in this part of the dream, Cooper, who is now 25 years older, or according to Cooper himself, when he tells Sheriff Truman about this dream the next day, not coincidentally, 25 years later is also when The Return, or Season 3, came out. Old Cooper is sitting across from someone who looks exactly like Laura Palmer, because it's the same actress, it's Sheryl Lee. She still looks the age Laura was when she died. She smiles. With them is who is referred to as the man from another place. Both of them speak kind of strangely. Here's how the conversation goes. That gum you like is going to come back in style. She's my cousin, but doesn't she look almost exactly like Laura Palmer? This part of the dream comes out to be true the next day, as Sheryl Lee comes in to play Laura Palmer's brunette cousin with glasses, Maddie Ferguson. Cooper asked the lady in the dream if she is Laura Palmer, and she says, I feel like I know her, but sometimes my arms bend back. She's filled with secrets. This is also easy to interpret because a few days later, when interviewing Dr. Jacoby, he says, Laura had secrets, and around those secrets she built a fortress. And remember, Laura also had 2 diaries. Where we're from, the birds sing a pretty song, and there's always music in the air. The man gets up and starts dancing. The woman gets up and walks over to Cooper, kisses him, and whispers something in his ear. The next morning, when Cooper explains everything to Sheriff Truman and Lucy, he adds a few things that we didn't actually see in the dream. His interpretation of seeing Laura's mom go down the stairs and then the flash of Bob is to believe that Laura's mother saw a vision of Bob. She did, but I'm not sure why Cooper got that from his dream. He also said, Hawk got a sketch of Bob, but that hasn't happened yet. Cooper also says Mike shot Bob, but again, that's not in the dream. Cooper says Laura whispered the name of her killer in his ear, but he forgot it when he woke up. A few days later, when the sketch of Bob is made from Sarah Palmer's vision, Cooper recognized it as Bob from his dream. The autopsy performed by Agent Albert Rosenfield showed Laura Palmer had a cocaine habit. The twine found suggested she was tied up twice in 2 different locations. They know the railway car location, and eventually they will find the first location, which was a cabin in the woods. In a throwback to Cooper's dream, one of the ways Laura was tied up had her arms bent back. Partial stomach contents that will eventually be reconstructed in a lab will yield a piece of a casino chip, the piece that had a letter J on it. This is actually a chip from a place called One-Eyed Jack's. It's a casino sex worker place over the border into Canada where Jock Renault worked. Remember, Jock is the other guy besides Leo Johnson that Laura was with when Bob got her. Further analysis of the scratches on her body will show us from a bird. If you remember what the man in the dream said, where we're from, the birds sing a pretty song. Cooper and Truman first see Mike in the elevator of the hospital, but make no note of him. That's before Cooper had the dream with him in it. When Hawk is interviewing Ronette's parents at the hospital, he also notices Mike going into a staff-only area and follows him in but loses track of him when he either goes to the oxygen storage or the morgue. A few days after Cooper's dream of Mike, Hawk was able to find him in a motel by the name of Mr. Philip Gerard, his middle name being Michael. He does not recognize the sketch of Bob at all. He also acts very differently than he did in the dream. He says he lost his arm in a car accident, but doesn't remember exactly where he was going. He used to sell pharmaceuticals, but now he sells shoes, and the tattoo on the arm he lost said Mom. Mr. Gerard does have a friend named Bob, but he's a veterinarian. A visit proves that it's not the same Bob, but Cooper confiscates the vet files in hopes of finding the bird that attacked Laura and left the marks on her body, and thereby finding the killer. This actually does lead them to Jock Renault, who owns a bird. When they go to his house, Jock is gone, but Bobby was just there actually planting Leo Johnson's bloody shirt. That seems kind of sneaky and underhanded, but I mean, it's not actually setting him up if Leo was actually involved in these crimes. They also found another issue of Flesh World magazine. You might remember that was the one in Laura's safety deposit box, and spoiler, these keep turning up all over the place. This time they figure out that the magazine has ads in them. One ad is Ronette, and there's another ad for Laura. Men responding to these ads were mailing responses to a P.O. box owned by Jock. In Renault's apartment there is also a photo of a cabin he owns. In the photo you can see it has red drapes. Same as the drapes behind Laura in the ad, and same as in Cooper's dream. On the way to Jock's cabin, they run into Margaret, the log lady, at her cabin. She says she has been expecting them and that they are 2 days late. Over tea, she tells them that her husband was a logger, and he met the devil. Quote, "Fire is the devil hiding like a coward in the smoke." End quote. Then she brings out the log and has Cooper ask it a question. This time he doesn't hesitate to ask. Quote, "What did you see that night, the night Laura Palmer was killed?" End quote. The log lady interprets what the log is saying. Quote, "Dark, laughing. The owls were flying. Many things were blocked. Laughing. 2 men, 2 girls. Flashlight passed by in the woods over the ridge. The owls were near. The dark was pressing in on her. Quiet then. Later footsteps. 1 man passed by. Screams. Far away. Terrible, terrible. 1 voice. Girl. Further up over the ridge. The owls were silent." End quote. They interpret this to mean Laura, Ronette, Leo, and Jock. But who is the 3rd man? If you don't already know, it was Leland, possessed by Bob. They leave Margaret's and continue towards Jock's cabin. They hear music in the air and walk towards it, finding that it is coming from Jock's cabin. Remember what the man said in Cooper's dream. There is always music in the air. Inside, they find it is a record player, and it's playing but skipping back, so it never actually stops at the end of the record. It's just skipping over and over again. They also find blood, Jock's bird. Remember what the man said in the dream. The birds sing a pretty song. They also find the other part of the casino chip that Laura hadn't swallowed. A lot happens in the season 1 finale, so I'll just go over the parts that matter to the central murder. In the hospital, Cooper and Truman question Renault, who basically tells them everything. Yes, he took Laura and Ronette to the cabin. They've been there tons of times. It was Laura who convinced Ronette to do the ads in Flesh World. Leo and Jock fought that night, and Leo hit him on the head with a whiskey bottle. Now, that contradicts what we see in the movie Fire Walk With Me about what happened that night. Upon reflection, I think that Jock was just so drunk and high that he didn't realize it was Leland. Jock used Leo's shirt to stop the bleeding, hence the bloody shirt that Bobby planted. Then they left the cabin, he passed out, and when he woke up, everyone was gone, and so was Leo's car. Coincidentally, Dr. Jacoby is also in the hospital at that same moment. He was attacked when he went to investigate a note that he received from someone claiming to be Laura Palmer. It was actually Maddie in a wig, and Donna and James put her up to it, because this entire time they are also doing their own side investigation, trying to find Laura's killer. Bobby goes to Leo and Shelley's house. I have not mentioned Shelley. Shelley is Leo Johnson's wife, and Shelley and Bobby are having an affair. Anyway, unfortunately, Leo has found out about Bobby and Shelley's affair and tries to kill Bobby. But during the fight, Leo gets shot by someone else through the window, and Leo isn't dead, but he's very badly injured, and Bobby leaves him there in the house, doesn't call for help, and Leo ends up in a coma with severe brain damage. Somehow Leland Palmer hears about Jock Renault being a suspect in Laura's death, so he goes to the hospital and kills Jock Renault. Cooper goes back to the hotel not knowing that his 2 main suspects have been murdered and seriously wounded. In his room, Cooper is shot several times, and that is how season 1 ends. Season 2 begins with Cooper still laying on the floor of his hotel room, shot, conscious but bleeding. An absent-minded, I guess, hotel employee comes in to give him the room service he ordered, but takes no notice of the crime scene. When he leaves, and yes, he leaves Cooper there laying on the floor bleeding, Cooper has a vision of a very tall man who is referred to in Twin Peaks lore and by Cooper as the Giant. The Giant says to Cooper, "There is a man in a smiling bag. The owls are not what they seem. Without chemicals," he points. And then he adds on, Leo locked inside a hungry horse. There is a clue at Leo's house. The giant asks for Cooper's ring and tells him that it will be returned to Cooper when he finds that all 3 things that he said, even though he said 4, are true, and that we want to help him. A day or 2 later, or maybe 3, the giant returns to Cooper in his hotel room and tells him more things. 1 person saw the 3rd man. 3 have seen him, yes, but not his body. 1 only, known to you, ready now to talk. Just to save everyone time, Ronette is going to wake up from her coma soon and will be able to help Cooper in the investigation. The giant also says, you forgot something. What Cooper forgot is actually, I haven't mentioned this before, but Audrey Horne, which is the daughter of Ben Horne. Ben Horne owns the hotel where Cooper is staying. They have this whole mini little romance going on, although, she is underage and Cooper, shuts that down, but it's very obvious Audrey has a crush on him. Anyway, he forgot something that is not relevant to the crime, really, honestly. I don't want to get too into it, but yeah, it's about Audrey Horne, so don't even worry about it. James Hurley hands over Laura's last tape that he got from Jacoby's office to Sheriff Truman. From listening to the tape, James remembers that one time he and Laura were in the forest together and she started to recite a scary poem about fire. And then she says, would you like to play with fire, little boy? Would you like to play with Bob? At Leo Johnston's house, now a crime scene, they find another issue of Flesh World. On a side quest, Deputy Andy finds the answer to the giant's statement about Leo Johnston locked inside the Hungry Horse. Leo was locked up in a jail in Hungry Horse, Montana, February 9, 1988, which is the night Teresa Banks was murdered. Remember, Cooper is looking for Laura's murderer, but he also believes it is the same person who killed Teresa Banks. At the hospital, after Cooper and Truman question Dr. Jacoby, Cooper sees a body bag hanging on a wall with the zipper open that kind of looks like it's smiling. That's it. That's seriously all that happens with that one part that the giant said. Season 2, Episode 1 ends with Ronette having flashbacks of the train car scene and Bob killing Laura. Cooper and Truman are able to show Ronette the sketch of Bob, which she reacts very violently and yells, train. A day or more later, Ronette has another attack in the hospital. Upon investigation, they find a paper with the letter B underneath her fingernail, like Laura and Teresa. RBT. Getting it? Robert. The log lady runs into Major Briggs at the RR Cafe one day and gives him a message from her log. The message is, deliver the message. Major Briggs understands what that means and he goes to find Cooper to deliver the message. Major Briggs' work is top secret, but it deals with deep space communication. Most of the communication he refers to as space garbage, gibberish. But turns out, at the time that Cooper was shot, instead of gibberish, they got a coherent message in English. The owls are not what they seem. And then later on in the morning, Cooper, repeated various times. Leland sees the sketch of Bob and recognizes him. He goes to tell Cooper and Truman that he knew him when he himself was a little boy. Leland would go to his grandfather's summer house. Next to the summer house was a vacant lot, but next to that was a white house. According to Leland, the name of the owner of that house? Robertson. At this point, Bob's name hasn't been released to the public. Only the small group of law enforcement know that the name of the person might be Bob, as per Cooper's dream and what James Hurley said about Laura. Also, Bob used to flick matches at him while saying, "You want to play with fire, little boy?" And then Leland flicks a match perfectly into an ashtray a few feet away. Suspicious. Research will show that no one by the name Robertson owned the house, and further research on that will lead to a dead end. So Mr. Gerard is at the police station selling Sheriff Truman some shoes when he sees the sketch of Bob and starts feeling not great. He goes to the bathroom where we see him try to inject himself with something, but he is too sick to do so. Then he comes out of the bathroom stall and says with that low growl from Cooper's dream, "Bob, I know you're near. I'm after you now." When he doesn't return to Sheriff Truman, he and Cooper go to the bathroom and find the needle that Mr. Gerard dropped on the floor. When they find him a few episodes later, he's back to acting like Mr. Gerard, the shoe salesman. But as they question him, the drugs are wearing off, as he begs for Cooper and the Twin Peaks police to give him his medicine. As an aside, Truman wants to give him the medicine, but Cooper and the other FBI agent refuse. Analysis of the syringe from the FBI shows that the medicine is something that is usually used for people with schizophrenia. So the FBI is deliberately denying a man with mental health his medication for their own benefit. When the drugs were off, and throwback to what the giant said, without chemicals, he points. Mr. Gerard turns into Mike. He says he is an inhabiting spirit, and Mr. Gerard is the host. Mike says Bob just wants to have fun, and when he smiles, everyone runs. He compares Bob to a parasite. Bob requires a human host and feeds on fear and pleasure. He is similar to Bob. Mike is similar to Bob. They used to be partners. Then he recites that Fire Walk With Me poem again. Or for the first time, because the first time was a dream. He explains in person this time about seeing the face of God and removing the arm that had the tattoo on it, and that he remains inside Mr. Gerard in order to try and find and stop Bob. Only the gifted and the damned can see Bob's true face. Cooper asks where Bob was at the moment, and Mike basically describes the Great Northern Hotel. Hawk goes to Harold Smith's apartment on a tip from Donna and finds the apartment a mess, and Harold has hung himself. They find the remnants of Laura's secret diary, which, once they start putting it together, has repeated references to Bob and implications that he had been regularly abusing and molesting her since early adolescence. She also calls him a friend of her father. A missing page that Harold left for Donna, and which she reads to Cooper, says, quote, "Last night I had the strangest dream," end quote, and proceeds to describe Cooper's dream of the Red Room, but from her point of view. Laura writes that the only person Bob is afraid of is Mike, but she doesn't know who Mike is. Then on the same page, the next entry says, "Tonight is the night that I die, and that dying is the only way to get away from Bob." Laura also writes in her diary about Ben Horn. "One day I'm going to tell the world about Ben Horn. I'm going to tell everyone who Ben Horn really is." I haven't talked about Ben Horn because he really doesn't have much to do with Laura's murder at all. I did mention briefly that his daughter is Audrey Horn. Ben was sleeping with Laura. That's about it. Not that that's a good thing. That is a grown-ass man sleeping with an underage girl. Anyway, Ben Horn owns the Great Northern Hotel, which is where Cooper got shot and what Mike was describing when asked where Bob is. He also owns Horn's department store and One-Eyed Jack's. So Cooper and the police get the mistaken impression that Ben Horn is the person who is possessed by Bob. And considering his connection to Laura, including having her picture on his desk, his ownership of One-Eyed Jack's, where Laura worked as a sex worker, he also owns Horn's department store, where Laura worked at the perfume counter, which is how she got the job at the casino. And Ben's alibi is a person that is presumed dead. He also has connections to Leo Johnson and Jacques Renault. So no, it's not a far stretch here. The man looks guilty as hell. The death of Maddie Ferguson. Maddie Ferguson was Laura Palmer's cousin. I'll remind you that when Cooper had that long prophetic dream a few slides ago, even though he believed the woman in his dream was Laura, and even though in her diary Laura described this dream from her point of view, the man from another place said that she's my cousin. Maddie came to Twin Peaks for Laura's funeral. She spent most of the series helping Donna and James Hurley with their mini investigation into Laura's death. Eventually, she decides she's going to head back home, but the night before she's supposed to leave, Leland Palmer, or Bob, kills her. Maddie finds Sarah Palmer passed out on the floor, then she sees the image of Bob, and then Bob and Leland's image switch back and forth as he beats her to death. Then we see him put the paper with the letter underneath her fingernail. It's the letter O. R-B-O-T. Okay, it's Robert. Or Robertson. Doesn't matter. He's trying to spell his name. At the exact moment that Maddie is being murdered, Cooper is in the roadhouse with the log lady because she told him there were owls at the roadhouse. While he sits there, the band playing fades away, time seems to stop, and the giant appears on the stage and says, "It is happening again." He fades away once Maddie is dead, and the roadhouse goes back to normal. Then, believe it or not, the senile hotel employee that left Cooper bleeding to death on the floor comes over and tells Cooper, "I'm so sorry." Maddie's body is found the next night, washed up along a river, also wrapped in plastic. Despite the strong case against Ben, Cooper's not completely convinced that everything is okay. I think he can tell something is still wrong or that he's missing something. When they bring Mike to Ben, Mike does not sense Bob. In the end, Cooper brings everyone together at the roadhouse in order to solve the murder. Leland, Ben, Truman, Albert, Hawk, Bobby, Leo, Hank. I know I haven't mentioned Hank before, but don't worry about it for this video. He has nothing to do with Laura's murder. He's the guy that shot Leo. Then, without an invitation, Major Briggs shows up with the senile hotel employee. Then the hotel employee offers Cooper a piece of gum. Leland mentions that is his favorite gum, and then the hotel employee says, "That gum you like is going to come back in style," which, if you don't remember, is one of the things the man from Cooper's dream said. Time literally stops. Cooper suddenly remembers what Laura said in the dream. "My father killed me." The giant appears and returns the ring to Cooper. Cooper manages to trick Leland into the police station interrogation room by making it appear that he is arresting Ben Horne instead. Once they get him there, Leland goes off the chain, yelling and throwing himself against walls, and basically confesses everything. He also recites the full Fire Walk With Me poem, or the first half of the fire, or you know what I mean. He recites both. So, remember the fire thing being a big deal? While Leland is in the interrogation room, the fire alarm in the building goes off, and so do the sprinklers. This makes Bob leave Leland's body as he slams his head into the metal door repeatedly. With Bob gone, Leland remembers everything he's done, or that Bob has done in Leland's body. In his words, Bob went inside him as a child, and when he was inside, he didn't know, and when he was gone, Leland couldn't remember. He confesses to all the murders, including Teresa Banks. He says they made him do it, and they wanted Laura. As Leland lays on the floor crying as he dies, Cooper guides him with words into the light. Truman just thinks that Leland must be crazy. Albert reminds him that other people saw Bob as well, and maybe Bob is the evil that men do. Major Briggs quotes my favorite Shakespeare of all time. "There are more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in your philosophy." Truman wonders, if Bob is real, where's Bob now? And then you see an owl. What's implied, in my opinion, and considering at one point Cooper dreamed of the superimposition of an owl over Bob's face, and that the owls are not what they seem, perhaps Bob can travel by possessing owls when he doesn't have a human host. Part 6. Twin Peaks, Sci-Fi, and the Supernatural. Whatever theory someone might have wanted to create about Twin Peaks that grounded it in reality outside of science fiction or supernatural, I believe goes out the window back in Fire Walk With Me. But if anyone still wanted to theorize that Bob isn't real and just an alter ego of Leland's sick mind, forget it. Because Twin Peaks The Return exists in a world we've never seen before, not even in the original series. I keep saying both sci-fi and supernatural because I'm not really sure how to classify what's going on. I can theorize as much as I want, but David Lynch is never going to give anyone a straight answer about this universe, and that's okay. I don't need an explanation. As Major Briggs said, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. Part 7. The Return, Season 3. I don't want to get too into this. I only bring it up because Agent Cooper somehow travels through time and saves Laura Palmer. So I guess nothing from Season 1 and 2 happened? Or something. I mean, Laura's dying is the reason Agent Cooper was in Twin Peaks in the first place. Time travel is tricky that way. The season ends with an older Laura Palmer, now in 2017, and then she starts screaming. There's no indication if there will be a Season 4. Part 8. The Other Characters. There are a lot of secondary characters and storylines in Twin Peaks. Most of the town and the people in the show knew Laura Palmer personally. I left them out because they don't have anything directly to do with Laura's death. In conclusion, Twin Peaks Season 2 continued for about 13 more episodes after everything. But most people agree that once the main mystery was solved, the show was not as interesting. At the very least, the viewership dropped. The show was cancelled at the end of Season 2 despite the cliffhanger where Bob takes possession of Cooper's body. As I mentioned, there's plenty of mystery in the Twin Peaks universe. Too much for one video. Well, I promised you the who, where, when, why, how, and what. So here's the wrap-up. Who killed Laura Palmer? Her father while being possessed by Bob. Where? In a train car. When? February 24, 1989. Why? Because Bob is some kind of malevolent spirit that wanted to possess Laura's body and she refused. How? Multiple stab wounds. What? Her dad was possessed by an evil spirit. FBI agent Dale Cooper solved the murder using investigation skills and magic. The magic part is dreams and visions had by mostly him, but also Sarah Palmer. Bob left Leland's body when he got wet during a fire alarm at the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Office. Bob might have jumped into an owl to travel with until he finds the next body to possess. At the end of Season 2, that body is Cooper's. Laura's spirit lives in the Red Room. In Twin Peaks The Return, once Cooper manages to get his body back from Bob, 25 years later, he goes back in time and saves Laura Palmer from dying. Confused? That's Twin Peaks, baby. Sorry, I was going for a comedic ending. I just want to leave off with, it's impossible to fully understand what is going on in Twin Peaks because their supernatural sci-fi world does not follow any familiar rules that we are used to in the genre. So your guess is as good as mine. And don't trust anyone who says they have it all figured out, unless it's David Lynch or Mark Frost themselves talking. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you want me to make another Twin Peaks video about something else.